No. It's asking if I have any good recommendations about game design. No, no. Except read everything, consume all media you can, and don't worry about anything. And this is one of the reasons why. This is about the Game Maker toolkit again. Again, nice enough guy, but I hate the way he presents game design as this solvable problem that exists outside of the context of actually making the game. It's just a false narrative of that's the way it is, right? And nobody knows all the solutions. Nobody knows how to approach things. What he can tell you is, hey, he wants to have the health bar show up in the world, man, because that's so cool. And so then you're like, well, I'm making a first person shooter, so I can't do it like Dead Space because I was on the back of the character. And you're like, oh, you put it on the arm. And then all of a sudden, like, you're making the goal the design thing, not the goal, which is, hey, expressing the health to the player in a meaningful way that makes sense with the style of the game. You'll see that again and again in his stuff, right? And anybody who trying to does this in the abstract of talking about game design this way, of the stuff that they haven't made, is they're going to tell you their desires for the things that they want, not interesting design, not struggles, not here's how you approach this or what you get over it. That's it. Anything you could pick up something interesting on or some tidbit. I'm reading a book on CIA in Africa, and for the game I'm working on now, I'm like, hey, the way factions work, there's some interesting things I can pull from here. This is one of the reasons why I don't actually like dedicated game design schools, because I think they rob people from being well-rounded individuals. And I think it's really important that people are well-rounded and that they have a lot of things to pull from. And it's just not a trade school training them for a job, because your tools are going to change all the time. You're going to be replaced. But what you bring to it as a person and what you bring creatively to anything that you create is your own. And so, are there things that I watch or listen to? Everything, right? I mean, you go gamer notes or design notes, because that's interesting. But again, that's people talking about their own experience, and that's way more interesting. And you're gonna be like, okay, so what are those? What are those? They're all over, man. I don't know. GDC's got a bunch of talks. Like, listen to them, but you don't have to agree with them. There's a bunch of talks you will get from people who do a lot of things, and there are a lot of people who are on the talk circuit. And you're like, oh man, I don't agree with that. And you're like, yeah, because they haven't tried to ship something in the last 20 years, right? Or whatever you want to make it your own. Like, I would tell you a way better way to approach game design if you're starting out is download Godot, download Unreal, download Unity, whatever, and say, I want to make this. And then in the tutorials of learning, like, and then just go as far as you can until you hit some roadblock. You're like, I don't know how to do this. Let me figure this out. Go watch a tutorial, read a tutorial. During those periods, you were going to learn about why people made the choices they made. You're like, wait a minute. I can't just have buildings filled with humans everywhere? That's crazy. Yeah, you can't. So I was gonna come up with an excuse of why you can, but you know what I'm saying. But like, no, like that is what you need to go do. That is what you need to experience, and that's where you start to learn about how you as a designer are you, and not just something else. I had someone once starting a project, and they're like, well, what is the turn radius of this? Like, he thought there should be some grand design document. And it's like, I don't know. Don't know what's going on in the world. Let's feel it out. Let's get a sense for it, right? And not everybody can design everything. That's the other thing. Man, somehow, the guys who make YouTube videos are magically, they can design everything. But when they design their game, it's a very, very, very discreet, tiny, little pedestrian puzzle game, because that's the easiest thing to design. But when you have to have something that has coherency across a long space, so much harder. So there's a podcast, Triple Click. You get design stuff out of there? I don't know, but I got my nightmare out of there. They're like, well, what if you got handed off and you had to design Civ 7? Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that. In fact, I don't even know if they know how to do it. Like, now they're looking at the stuff the guy who designed Civ 4 went off, started his own company, and they're kind of looking back at what he did in Humankind, right? Like, yes, we all pay attention to each other. We all look at each other's stuff. But, like, is there some resource? Is there something? And I know you're not framing it this way, that there's some magical resource that's going to solve all your design things. But the reality is that every one of those guys who does those YouTube videos about design, who isn't making something, and they're not talking about the design of what they're making, it's kind of like the TV show Friends. You know, like Friends, like everyone's just hanging out and like, yeah. You know, like how you had your friends when you all were starting out in your early 30s or 20s, and you just went to the coffee shop all day and hung out and didn't really have to work or care about that, and you just had a bunch of money and lived in New York City, right? Like that. And that nobody beat up David Schwimmer's character. Because tell me, there is no point that you wouldn't, that your friends just wouldn't be like, I've had enough of that guy. Whatever, I forget his name. I hated that show. I couldn't stand it. But like, they're like that. It's just fake. It's just fake. And it's going to give you a bunch of false ideas about design. The best design stuff you can read and it's all over, right? It's just like consume. Like postmortems are interesting, but I mean postmortems are also fabricated, right? Because they want to tell the story they want to do. Ken Birdwell at Valve once made the joke that talking about how Valve is organized was the greatest way to sink a bunch of game companies. And they're talking about the Cabal system because it just doesn't work anywhere else. Like you need to have all the other stuff involved, right? Yeah, no, he wasn't being competitive when he said that, but he's just like sharing stuff out is just dangerous in its own way. And so anything you read, anything you watch, take it with a grain of salt. Take it with whatever you're doing, whatever you're expressing. Nobody has this aha moment of like, oh yeah, well, that's going to solve all my problems. But it's just a bunch of pieces and parts of it. And look, and just go, is this apropos to the thing I'm making? Is this like the kind of thing I want to make, right? I don't know. Like it's really hard to think that there's going to be some resource that's available. Like I've never read a design book I like. I've read a lot of design books I disagree with. I've read a lot of design books that I've got notes on how I disagree with. And I like the people's games and I like the people. But like, yeah, it's just, so I don't have any recommendation except watch everything and then don't believe any of it. How's that? I don't know. I mean, kind of just find your way. Find your way. Start creating though. Create the stuff yourself. And the design that comes from how you solve those problems will become kind of your thing, right?